This is the story of the most violent maniac from Soviet Union. Chikatilo was sentenced to death 32 years ago. On October 15, 1992, one of the most brutal Soviet serial killers, Andrei Chikatilo, was sentenced to death by a court. The verdict began to be read on October 14th and ended only the next day. Yes, the criminal confessed to committing 56 murders. According to operational data, there were 65 victims. Mad Beast, Rostov Ripper, Red Ripper, Killer from the Forest Belt, Citizen X, that's what Chikatilo was called. Andrei Chikatilo was born on October 16, 1936, in the village Yablon, Ukraine. According to some reports, he had signs of hydrocephalus in childhood. Until the age of 12, Andrei was constantly beaten by his mother because he suffered from nocturnal urinary incontinence. With the beginning of the Second World War, Chikatilo's father went to the front. In one of the battles, he was captivated by German forces and was listed as a traitor to the motherland by the Soviet government. In 1944, Andrei Chikatilo went to the first grade. When the famine began in 1946, he did not leave the house, fearing that they might catch him and eat him. His mother told him stories about how his older brother Stepan, who had disappeared during those days, had allegedly been kidnapped and eaten. At the same time, there is a version according to which Chikatilo's older brother was eaten by his parents during a famine. However, subsequently, no documents about the birth and death of Stepan were found. After graduating from high school, in 1954 Chikatilo tried to enter the faculty of law at Moscow State University, but could not pass the competition. He himself was convinced that everything was because of his father's reputation. In 1962, when Chikatilo was 26, his younger sister Tatiana introduced him to her friend Fina. 2 years after meeting, they got married. Soon the couple had a daughter, Ludmila. Chikatilo entered the correspondence department of the university in Rostov. In 1969, a second child was born in his family's son Yuri. In 1965, Chikatilo became the chairman of the District Committee for Physical Education and Sports, and in 1970, at 33, he got a job as a teacher of Russian language and literature in a boarding school. At that time, his wife became a kindergarten teacher. In 1974, Chikatilo began working as a Master of Industrial Training in Novoshakhtinsk at Kolega 39, and in 1978 he and his family moved to Shakhty, where in September he began working as a teacher at Kolega 33. And already in December of that year, Chikatilo committed his first murder. As Chikatilo himself later admitted, he first killed 9-year-old Elena Zakotnova on December 22, 1978. Secretly from his wife, he used the services of prostitutes, for which he bought a house in Mesinsky Lane. He dragged the girl there. The mutilated body of the child was found 2 days later. The girl was raped in the usual and perverted form and then stabbed with a knife. However, the examination established that the girl was strangled. Alexander Kravchenko, previously convicted of rape and murder, was arrested for this murder. He was forced to confess to the murder of the girl. On July 5, 1983, he was executed for the crime committed by Chikatilo. Later, when Chikatilo was already caught, he admitted that he did not want to kill Lena. He lured the girl with the promise of chewing gum and wanted to just have fun. However, the schoolgirl began to resist and shout. To make the girl shut up, Chikatilo strangled her and had an orgasm. 3 years after the first crime, Chikatilo, frightened by what he had done, was quieter than the water below the grass. But he couldn't stand it. In 1981, he killed 17-year-old prostitute Larissa Tkachenko, and in 1982, 12-year-old Lyubov Buryuk. And he could not stop. A series of murders began. In 1982, Chikatilo killed a total of 7 children between the ages of 9 and 16. The maniac met future victims at bus stops and train stations under any pretext, showing the way, puppies, stamps, VCR, etc. He lured them into the forest belt and, having walked far enough into the forest, sometimes the victims walked with the killer for several kilometers. Chikatilo was always ahead, suddenly threw himself with a knife. Up to 60 knife wounds were found on the mutilated bodies of the dead, Many had their noses, tongues, genitals, breasts, and eyes gouged out. Chikatilo could not bear the sight of his victims. Among his victims were many vagabonds, drunkards, and mentally retarded. Chikatilo was arrested for the first time in 1984 for suspicious behavior in the central market of Tashkent. He engaged in oral sex with a prostitute right at the bus station. Vaseline, soap, and 2 skeins of rope were found in his possession. However, at the same time, the tests taken from Chikatilo did not match those found in the victims, which provided him with an alibi. As the press later wrote, Chikatilo had the rarest feature of a paradoxical allocator, when antibodies of the second blood group are present in the semen. However, it was proven later that the killer's tests were simply carelessly taken. Then Chikatilo, who had already committed 32 murders, was released. After that, another 21 people will become his victims. Time passed, and the murders in the forest belts continued. Therefore, in December 1985, the Operation Forest Strip began, which took place under the control of the CPSU, probably the most large-scale operational event ever carried out by Soviet law enforcement agencies. Throughout the operation, more than 200,000 people were checked for involvement in a series of murders. 1062 crimes were solved during the operation, and information was collected on 48,000 of people with sexual deviations, to which Soviet psychology assigned many categories. Police officers, dressed in civilian clothes, constantly rode trains as bait. It is noteworthy that Chikatilo himself was a soldier and participated in this operation, was on duty at the stations, helping the police to catch himself. Feeling increased surveillance, he became more cautious and did not kill anyone in 1986. The murders resumed in 1987 when Chikatilo killed 13-year-old Oleg Makarenkov on May 16, whose remains were discovered only in 1990, after Chikatilo's arrest. The bodies of children were found regularly, even in the center of Rostov, in the park and botanical garden. He was also killed in other cities of the Soviet Union, where he went on a business trip: Zaporizhia, Leningrad, Moscow. Andrei Chikatilo was arrested for the second time in 1990. After the murder of the 22-year-old prostitute Svetlana, Chikatilo left the forest and went to the Donleskaz railway station. The policeman who happened to be nearby asked him to show his documents, as Chikatilo's clothes were not suitable for common mushroom pickers in this area. Since there was no formal basis for the arrest, the policeman only recorded the last name and released Chikatilo. But a few days later, a body was found near the station. The police checked the report of all those on duty at that time and saw the last name Chikatilo. Since he was previously suspected of murder, Chikatilo was placed under surveillance. Chikatilo was arrested on November 20, 1990. That day, after taking time off from work, he went to the clinic to have an X-ray of a finger bitten by one of the victims during the fight. The finger was broken. Chikatilo returned home, then went to the kiosk for beer and took a 3-liter can, which he carried in a basket for vegetables. On the way back from the beer stand, he was detained by operatives. According to one of the operatives who took part in the operation, everyone was surprised that Chikatilo, such a healthy man, bought a little beer. There was about half a liter in a 3-liter can. During the search, 32 kitchen knives and shoes were found in his house, the print of which coincided with the one that was found near the body of one of the victims. Chikatilo was interrogated for 10 days, but he was not conscious. Then the investigators sought help from a psychiatrist, after a conversation with whom the criminal confessed to the murders and began to testify. He was accused of 53 murders, but he confessed to 56. The investigation could not prove 3 murders. He killed 21 boys, aged 7 to 16, 14 girls, aged 9 to 17, 18 girls and women. The trial of the murderer took place in April 1992. At the trial, the maniac tried to pretend to be crazy, shouted, insulted the judges and people in the courtroom, showed his genitals, and claimed that he was pregnant and breastfeeding. However, a forensic psychiatric examination 3 times showed him to be completely sane. On October 15, Chikatilo was sentenced to death. The sentence referred to 52 murders, as the court decided that there was insufficient evidence about one of the victims.